So I want to speak on this big contrast that I've seen. Something I remember from as far back as I can to elementary school, which is this notion of being educated versus being uneducated, as they say, no college or having not graduated from college. And where that puts you in society, at least in terms of people's general interpretations. Now, I'll be blunt up front, and I don't agree with this, but it's almost as if there's an attempt to make it seem like if you don't go to college, you're a loser. You're not as intelligent as your peers. You're not going to be successful and have a good job. Many kids are growing up thinking that. The whole purpose, I think, a lot of the times for kids that go through the K through 12 system, the public school system, is to eventually attend a 4-year university and get a bachelor's degree, so on, whatever they decide to do after that. Now, my experience was a little bit different. I did end up going to college a few years after most of my peers because, quite frankly, I didn't want to go to college at that age. I wanted to work. And I dealt with that. I dealt with a lot of that, the kind of fall back, even from some family members. Not even with my family, it was interesting because my mom and her whole side of the family went to college and they're doing well for themselves. My father and his side of the family did not attend university, but they're still doing good. So I always saw that there are more ways to be successful outside of college. And in many ways, people are making a mistake, especially young adults, if they think going to college is going to give them some free ride to be successful. If they think it's going to give them an automatic pass to have a career and job and be able to support a family, because that's not the case. You have to also be marketable. You have to be approachable. You have to be someone that knows how to operate in the world outside of academia. You have to be street smart, as they say. There's book smart, there's also street smart, when dealing with people. So I think college is a good thing. I'm not anti-college, but I did develop a resentful view on it just because of a little bit of how I was brought up and how I was raised in the school system. Now, I'll take you guys back to, I'm not afraid to share this, as many young boys were. I was a very troubled student. I was getting suspended all the time throughout elementary school, middle school, parts of high school, I was a bit of a troublemaker. Now, I still did fairly well in my classes. I was still able to graduate on time, but I was always seen as someone who was, an outsider, someone who didn't fit in as much with the mold. I took, in freshman year of high school, I took a lower level of math class, I think a step up from special education. And I just always looked at it as like, oh, well, I'm not one of the people that's going to do well and go to college, because you have people taking AP class, I think even pre-calc, if not even calculus, their freshman year of high school. And I just didn't have the confidence. Now, why was that the case? I don't know. Like I said, I wasn't the best student when I was younger, but, I was able to, math was always a strong subject for me, And I even looked at my peers around me, and a lot of them, it just seemed like there were some people that they just put in these classes and put in these classes and put in these classes, and I never really understood it back then. Even now I'm still grasping with the idea of why that's the case. Now, whether it's them wanting to do it, whether it's them being more dedicated to school, I don't know. It just seems like whoever wants to take it can. If you just, are there present, it's really not that hard to pass high school if you just show up. Like I said, I was able to graduate on time. Not with stellar grades, but with okay grades, Some subjects I was stronger at than others. But the time I graduated high school, which was in 2016, I'll be upfront on this. I did not even know what a major was. I did not even know, not knowing what my major was, I didn't even know what a major was, period. I didn't know what a bachelor's degree was. I didn't know the difference between a bachelor's and a master's and I didn't know any of that. So I got out of high school with no real plan or idea in terms of further education. Now, whether that's my own fault, it could be partly. Whether it's the public education system failing students, I think that's a big part of it, probably a bigger part of it, to be honest with you. I'm not going to make this a political, I'm not a political page or a political channel, but throughout my whole life, I've heard criticism of the American public education system and how it's not doing the best job preparing students, preparing youth for their future. It's just simply not. Um, Almost any of my high school peers that I've talked to through adulthood would say the same thing about the high school we went to. And it was in a good area, it was a decent high school. And even the ones who went to college right after will say, it was not a good education. So with that, I didn't know what I wanted to do after high school. And I always felt like an outsider. I felt like someone who was less than because I didn't go straight into college. And I also had a lot of pressure as well because of my mom's side of the family, who, as I mentioned, they were all educated, expecting me to do that. Like I said, the societal cultural expectation of, the American dream, go to college, graduate, get married, have kids, own a home, the white picket fence with a dog. I mean, that's all good. I think those are great things. I think that's wonderful if it can work out that way, but it just simply doesn't for everyone. There's some people that flourish more in other environments. I myself have a few friends who are into construction, who are into trades, who are into contracting, and they're actually doing very well for themselves. Many of whom are doing better than a lot of people who graduated college. I've known plumbers and electricians who are making more than $200,000 a year, and they didn't attend college. I know people who went straight into the military, and they were able to get out of the military with all these benefits and incentives, and even go back to college later and have it paid for, having stuff to help them with, I think, blue tags, certain things they can get discounts on. The GI Bill, I'm not a veteran, I never served, but I do have a few friends who did serve, and they told me bits and pieces of the GI Bill and kind of what it consists of, and it's very beneficial. And I'll put it this way as well. There's also a lot of people who do go to college and they get degrees that aren't as useful outside of college. There's a lot of people that go to college, unfortunately, being a bit naive, and just get whatever degree and think, oh, well, just because I went to college, I'm guaranteed a success. At a young age, 17, 18 years old, they might think that. I myself have matured a lot in the past few years. Once I hit the age of 25, it's like just a night and day difference in terms of my ability to really see things for what they are and just think, cognitively and deeper about things and be a lot more logic based and calculated. Now I know they say, men's brains don't stop developing around the age of 25, 26. That would make sense. But I think there's also a lot of people who go to university, right out of high school, and they don't do anything with their degree. So you shouldn't always look at those examples and compare ourselves, But there's also people who go to college and do very well for themselves. There's people who get, go into medical school. There's people who go into law school and do very well. There's people who, are psychologists making a lot of money. There's people who are engineers, working for companies like Boeing and Blue Origin, making hundreds of thousands of dollars. Software engineers. I mean, there's people that are doing very well for themselves as well. But I think the big issue that I have is just this notion of the end all be all, straight to college. That's the only way to make it in this country. That's just simply not the case. I took some time off and worked and saved money on the side, which was good. I got to kind of see the world more for what it is and get, person to person experience. I was a lot more street smart, right? Should I say I was a lot more street smart than I would have been going straight to university. Now, around when I turned 21, I did return to, my academic career. I went back to college, right? Should I say I started college. This was actually right before the pandemic happened. So I went to community college. And even I saw which I think this is just silly, but I mean, community college to me is just the smarter route. Anyone who knocks community college, I think, is just so in the wrong. You take the same general education classes and you can just transfer into the major and whatever university you want to go to. And, hopefully, again, I think something like 30% of students in the University of Washington engineering department, it's around a third, are transfer students from community college or from other colleges. So, it certainly is a popular route for a lot of people. And as I mentioned, the classes are like a third of the price. The class sizes are a lot smaller. So for people who maybe have a harder time paying attention or need more student to professor interaction, that's a much better way to go about it. I just wish that community college would get a little bit more respect. Even my professors, they were such amazing professors, especially the ones in the engineering, STEM-based departments at the college, at the community college I went to. They were such amazing people. They were such awesome people. They were there for the betterment of their students, They're not professors at schools like, Harvard or these big universities like UW, but it's like, I'll tell you what, to me, they were as stellar, if not better, than the colleges I had in university. I'm very thankful for their time and their care. And like I said, them having that one-on-one availability with students, whereas if you're at a university, a big university, and you're taking a gen ed, something like chemistry or calculus, you might be one of like 200 to 300 students. You know what I mean? It's going to be very hard to get one-on-one interactions with your professors. So, there's nothing wrong with community colleges. There's nothing wrong with taking time off of college. There's nothing wrong with working and saving your money. There's nothing wrong with going to the military or getting into a trade or, figuring out another way. The reason why I wanted to make this video, quite frankly, is just because I've just seen, like, you can tell, anyone can tell, this stigma that they put of, oh, well, if you don't go to college, you're a loser and all this. It's like, it's not the case at all. It's not the case at all, Even just the word educated, uneducated, I don't even like that term, The consider educated means you got a bachelor's degree, and if not, you're considered uneducated. It's like, it's just derogatory in a way, It's implying that this person is lesser, on the scale of intelligence or status or whatever it might be. And I'll tell you what, a lot of these blue collar people I've met, people who went straight into trades, they're extremely intelligent people. I mean, you have them give measurements on a roof or take something apart or work materials. I mean, they're very smart. Mechanics, they're very intelligent. I'll be honest. When I did transfer to University of Washington, I expected it to be challenging, but it wasn't. Excuse me. It wasn't as challenging as I thought it would have been. And that's not taking anything away from it, but that's to say, look, like, anyone can do it. That doesn't mean you're so much smarter than the average person because you went to college. That just means you have the financial ability and time, and you wanted to go that route. Of course, there's a lot of limiting factors. I mean, college classes aren't cheap. College, in a way, is like a full-time job because of how much you have to attend to it, making sure assignments are done on time, making sure you're studying for exams, all different kinds of things you have to deal with. You don't really have time. I mean, there's always exceptions and stuff, but it's going to be hard to balance a work life, social life, and academic life, which is, again, why I think community college is a great option, because it's a lot cheaper. And, of course, there's financial aid and stuff, which I've known a lot of people who took financial aid. I think that's great as well. But, yeah, I never liked that. Just the whole, just the degrading, just the condescendingness of educated versus uneducated. I just never agreed with that. Like I said, I'm not anti-college. I myself went to college. But we also have to be real and say there's a lot of people that are going to college that are wasting their time and getting degrees that aren't going to help them. There's people that go to college and do very well for themselves. There's people that don't go to college and, just blow all their money and are lost in life. But there's also people who don't go to college, that go into trades, that work right out the gate from high school, and save a lot of money, and go into the military and get a lot of incentives and GI Bill and all this kind of stuff. So with that, I just hope that we can come to a point where it can stop being such a forefront thing. Because it's almost as if people really look at those who are in adulthood who didn't get a bachelor's degree at a university as losers. I mean, it's just very ridiculous. And like I said, I'm kind of in the middle too, where I didn't go to university straight after high school, so I didn't do it in a conventional fashion. I took some time off, and I went to community college first, and I worked on the side, and I also did, jobs that weren't very nice. Like I worked in a warehouse at one point. I worked at a deli clerk. I worked in the produce department at a grocery store. I've done, side hustles, Uber Eats, stuff like that. And working is a great thing. Anytime someone's being productive with their time, you should not knock it, Now, if someone's just playing video games all day and not doing anything productive, yeah, they need to change what they're doing and their outlook. But when it comes to just the big divide, I'm not with it, And even on the news, you hear them talking about certain voting demographics of, oh, well, this one has these so-and-so uneducated voters. Like, what is that supposed to mean? Are you implying that the voters are dumb? Like, what is that supposed to mean? You can even just tell the way they say it is, again, it's in a derogatory kind of just condescending way. And I'll never agree with that, People should be treated with respect, whether they went to college or not. People deserve to be treated with respect. That's, to me, is just shouldn't be a privilege. It should be a basic right to be treated with respect, unless your character or you're doing unless you're doing something that warrants not to be treated with respect. If you're being, rude or whatever. But yeah, just very unfortunate, and hopefully the dynamics and understanding will change to people being a little bit more open-minded and not so egotistical, because let's be honest, you can also tell a lot of people think, they have a lot of pride in where they went for university, which is fine. I understand it, You want to root for your college football team, that's great. But you shouldn't think you're better than anyone.